and gentlemen, this is going to be our 13th podcast with Women's Empowered Podcast. This is Concussion Girl to Iron Woman. Hi, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
All right. Do you want to let us know, what's with your Instagram name? Where'd that come from?
Yeah, sure. I grew up swimming, and just kind of as a transition from being a student to, not being a student and not being on competitive sports teams, I ended up discovering triathlon. I signed up for one in 2019. I absolutely loved it. So I signed up for a second one, and there was 2 weeks in between. And the weekend between the first one and the second one, I was in a car accident, and I sustained my third concussion. So I was just feeling really hopeless. I was like, why did this happen to me again? What did I do to deserve this? And I was like, I don't think that's the mindset to feel like, to live by right now. And why not just really go full force and not only go headfirst into my treatments, but also I decided that I wanted to do a 3-year project where I, increased my triathlons and whatnot up to a full Ironman, the 140.6.
Very nice. So let's go to your first concussion. How did that happen?
Yeah, so in 2013, I was graduating high school. I was recruited to swim for Lafayette College, and I went to school, started, everything up. This was like the second week of classes. I was just like, the transition was really rough, so I wasn't sleeping well. Just like a combination of things, and we had an underwater set, and basically going the width of the pool, so 6 lanes across, going underwater. Um, and I was doing that set, and I've done things like that before. It's not an issue of that. But because I was so exhausted, I misjudged where I was in the pool, and I pulled my arms down, and my head hit the wall, like hard. So, yeah, I dealt with that concussion for about 8 months.
What did that do to you physically? How did you feel? How did like, was it something that you noticed all the time?
Yeah, yeah. So I think just to kind of give a timeline, I think there's a misconception that a lot of people who get concussions that they go unconscious. And I think it's about 80% of people actually don't. So as soon as I hit my head, I was like, oh man, obviously that's really painful. I was really dizzy. And my coach was like, yeah, you should probably not be swimming right now. Um, so I texted a couple of my friends. I was still just out of it. They told me not to go to sleep immediately, which was super useful, helpful advice. And the next day I was like, I still feel horrible. So I went to the campus doctor, and they're like, yeah, this isn't good. So my first concussion, it was just really dizzy, out of it. I had a lot of balance issues, a lot of headaches. The headaches were probably the most prominent thing.
And the second one, when did that happen?
So that was about a year later. I guess there was just something in my recovery that didn't fully click, because I didn't actually have an impact for my second concussion, but basically my symptoms were coming back, and I remember really vividly, I was in a history class. I love history, and I was trying to read the text that the professor had given us, and I just kept seeing two, and I was like, yeah, that's probably not good. So, um, yeah, they the doctors checked me out again. They're like, yeah, this is concussion symptoms, and I was sent back to physical therapy, and just had to kind of be on a similar trajectory where I still couldn't swim, wasn't able to be in class all the time, stuff like that.
Got you. Um, Was there any permanent damage? Like, did they find anything in CAT scans and stuff like that? How are you?
Um, so after when I got in the car accident for the third concussion, I did get a CAT scan and X-ray, and later on I got 3 MRIs, and they haven't seen anything. But it's actually really common with concussions to have damage that isn't seen in tests like that. Um, but in terms of what my doctors are seeing right now, they're not seeing anything that's a long-term issue, but it makes me feel more cautious. I have anxiety and depression to begin with, so like that really is exacerbated after concussions, and so it's just like really like there's nothing that I have in terms of my medical records where it's like, oh, this is physically like not great. But there's definitely that mental aspect, and um, not tests aren't going to show everything. So I don't really have like a perfect answer to that question.
No, I absolutely understand. I myself get migraines, and I know sometimes it's really hard, like dealing with doctors because the brain is still, it's such a complex thing that they still don't have a full grasp on it. And so I think sometimes they can't see things like a test isn't going to necessarily show. In fact, I don't know if you've heard about CTE.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, and they're coming out more and more about that. And there's still, for the longest time, there wasn't any tests or anything that they could do to see it before, you know, an autopsy or anything. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's like so actually kind of backpedaling on the physical symptoms thing. I actually do have chronic migraines now, like as the result of the third concussion. So
Mhm.
I guess you could say that that's kind of an ongoing symptom, but my migraine headaches are very different from my concussion headaches. Like I've known the difference for, since I started getting migraines, but yeah, I mean it's just I think it's kind of twofold. It's like one, the brain is such a complex organ that there's so much we don't understand and there's so much we can't see. But it's also, having that team of doctors that when you tell them something, they believe you and they don't like. I think it's important to have a discourse and to not go into a doctor's appointment saying like WebMD said I have cancer, so I'm like,
Yeah.
but at the same time, if like I've told my doctors I'm having certain symptoms, and I've connected with other women on Instagram who are or were, suffering from concussions, and a lot of them have said that their doctors don't believe them or their doctors won't
Mhm.
give them testing, and that just like it hurts because like I'm so fortunate to have, such a great team of doctors, but that should be the default.
Yes.
Um, and I think, you know, I work in politics, so I don't want to get like super political about it, but at the same time, like a caring patient-centered medical system, I don't really think should be a one side or the other. I think that should be the default of that system because the goal is to heal people. It's not to tell them that they're nuts because, they're having more headaches or their balance is off or, you know, something like that.
Absolutely. Um, I 100% agree with you. I've gone through many doctors and have not had the best medical care. Usually they do tell you you're nuts, it's all in your head.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, unfortunately it's not, it doesn't make it very fun.
Oh, not at
And,
all.
and most of the time it's extremely damaging to a patient because I'm sure there's others like myself. Like I've unfortunately stopped going to doctors because that's all I get. And so I've just, created my own system to
Yeah.
handle my migraines instead of going to them where usually I'm just handed medication that doesn't work or makes it worse.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. That is something that most definitely needs to be addressed and worked on is our medical system. Our medical system is broken.
Yes. And I think there's also kind of that component, and I think this is every industry. I don't think it's just the medical industry, but I think this idea of like emotional intelligence and actually like having that empathy and that ability to really have an open communication without telling someone that they're they're wrong or they're nuts, or um about like 4ish years ago, my primary care doctor referred me to a therapist, and I was like, I was really excited to get back into therapy. Like, it was great. I went to this therapist, and I was having a bad day, so I was very upset and was just kind of rambling and yada yada. And this man literally said to me, "Do not come back to my office until you're on medication. Like, you're unstable." And I was like, "You're this is mental health care, and I've told you I have diagnosis." I was just speechless. Like, I've never, like, in the medical sphere, had that level of blatant disrespect. And I just, it's really frustrating that that's, I think we're in just such a culture where everything's rushed and people are on these tight schedules and, everything like that, where it's like we're not actually taking that quality time to connect with other people and understand what's going on and figure out how can we make this create a solution instead of creating another problem.
Yes. I definitely think that it's gotten that way. You go in and they want to do the 10-minute assessment and then hand you a script and see you later. I
Yep.
think it definitely, and doctors and stuff they need to come together and work together, because I don't think it takes just one. It doesn't take just like a general physician. You got to have somebody mind, body, spirit, nutrition's a huge one too, and just kind of all combined it. And I think we could, especially with our modern day systems, I mean, we have all this technology, we could easily come together and put something together to do the whole circle.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And something I'm really grateful for, just on top of having a great medical team, is that they've prioritized being in communication with one another. So my vision therapist would send reports to my concussion doctor and my primary doctor and my eye doctor, which was great because now when I go back in the summer, since I wear glasses, I go get my eyes checked every summer. She can look at that and say hey, I got these reports. Is there anything else I should know? And I, don't necessarily have to open a giant can of worms and retell this, story and whatnot.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's something I talk to my friends about a lot too, is just in terms of mental health care, a lot of people, like myself included, I've been with the same therapist for 4 years now. But switching doctors or switching therapists is just like it's really taxing because you have to retell that, just so much emotional baggage and trauma. And it's just, if you can avoid that situation, that's really ideal, because
Yeah, most definitely. And it's, I don't know, it's important. I think people also need to get used to mental health being out there and open up about it, because there's still such a stigma about it too. And then um actually utilizing them. Like, I'm glad you've found one that you like and you've used the same one for 4 years. I think sometimes it can be a little daunting. Like, I know I've had some issues going in to see therapists and stuff, and it can be a little frightening. Like, you are giving all of this vulnerable information to them. Yes.
right.
So let's talk about the triathlons
Sure.
and how you built up to that. Did you have to train?
Yeah, so um it's kind of interesting, kind of going off the mental health care, because it's connected to that. So
Hmm.
at the beginning of 2019, I was, trying to switch career fields, applying to grad school, just my depression was really, really bad. And I was working at a Lifetime Fitness at the time, teaching swim lessons as I was, doing all these other things. and they hosted an indoor triathlon. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, looked like a lot of fun. The one of the aqua aerobics instructors was like, oh, I'm signing up for the Philadelphia women's triathlon. I was like, oh, that sounds like a lot of fun. So I started looking into it. And I was like, why don't I do this? Like, I've been needing something to motivate myself. Like, as I said, I grew up swimming, and like I felt like I lost that for a really long time. And I was like, it's really, I think it's a good year to kind of reclaim my time and my space. And so yeah, I signed up. I was swimming a couple times a week, at Lifetime. I My family has a couple of bikes, so I would go and ride around and just kind of figure out like distances and speeds and reacquaintance myself with gear shifts and stuff like that. I also have really bad asthma, so I tried to run, and I don't know if I'm not sure where you're located, but here on the East Coast, I live outside Philadelphia. Um, there was a really bad pollen issue here, so I
Mm-hmm.
would go and try to run, and my lungs just like weren't. So I was like, I'm gonna like do like the thing is my goal was to finish. Like I didn't have any expectations or whatever. So I was like, I know I am capable of running a 5K. I've done it before. Um, so like I didn't do like the most intense or thorough training, but like I did really like push myself to create a routine and stick to that and hold myself accountable to building up and getting stronger and being able to finish that race.
Very nice. I'm in Nevada, so we've got the dry heat, we've got pollen sometimes. Yeah, it definitely can, you don't want to run out here in the summer. No. Um, so have you done the Ironman yet, or are you still building up to it?
So no, God no. So just to kind of give you like some context to why my reaction's like that.
Uh,
Um, so an Ironman triathlon is a 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike, and a marathon 26.2 mile run. The sprint triathlon that I did was a 300-meter swim, 10-mile bike, and 5K 3.1 mile run. So like completely like same sport, but like very different.
yeah.
Um, and so that wasn't even my intention to do an Ironman until after I got the concussion. And I just got medically cleared from my concussion issues this month. So my plan right now is to do an Olympic distance triathlon, which is about twice the length of a sprint this year in August. Next year I'm going to do a half Ironman, which is, take that distance I said earlier, cut it in half, and then do the full Ironman in 2022.
Very nice.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. All right. Let's see. Do you have any words of advice for a younger generation?
Yeah. Um, so I was talking to a friend a few months back, and, I was really upset. And, we were just talking about like comparing to others and, things like that. Um, and, my friend said to me, he was like, um, we all compare ourselves to others, that's not, we all know it's not great, but what you need to remember is that you can and should carve your own path. And, I've been really living by that ever since. And I think another thing, I was at the Women's March this year in Philadelphia, and I was talking to a volunteer, and we are just I was telling her this story and about, we were talking about triathlons and stuff, and she looked at me and she said, you know, life gets better, but it doesn't get easier. And I think, I've said that to a few of my friends since, and they're like, yeah, that that's it. Like things have gotten better because, I have a better understanding of myself. I know my needs. I have really a good support network, things like that. But, there's always going to be a new challenge. And even though that's a thing, like it doesn't mean that, everything sucks forever. Like So I think like those two things have been really big driving forces for me recently.
Very nice. Is there a time that you felt most empowered?
That's a good question. Um, I guess to get a little bit political, um,
Mm.
my first job out of college, I graduated in 2016. I was on the Hillary Clinton campaign. So being in Pennsylvania and, watching my state and, so many other states go for a candidate that I felt like was so diametrically opposed to everything I believe in, and just like, there's just so much baggage to go with that entire situation that I just feel like anything that I've been able to do since, um, just to really reclaim my own space and my own, belief that, that the moral arc of the universe does truly bend towards justice. That's when I generally feel the most empowered. I think the other thing, now that I'm kind of like thinking about it, is in 2017, I finally went and started chasing one of my biggest dreams that I had in high school and college, which was to teach English abroad. And, I applied to the program I wanted to do. I got in, like, I saved up that money, I planned it out, and I spent the 2017-18 school year teaching English in Spain. And, like, it wasn't perfect. I had a great time. It was difficult in a lot of aspects, but I get to look back on that and say, like, I had this dream, this desire that I've wanted for half a decade, and I did it. And I think, especially in terms of how daunting an Ironman try is with that 146 miles, like, so I guess to kind of put that in context, like, that race, knowing my capabilities, I think it's going to take me about 13 hours. Like, thinking about that can be really scary, but then I look back and say, like, well, I wanted to teach English abroad for 5 years, and I had never been abroad before. Like, I'd never traveled by myself before. Like, well, I mean, I had, but like nowhere far. And I did that, and I succeeded, and I stayed the whole year, and I learned a lot and had a great time, and just grew a lot as a person. So I kind of think, just kind of going back to that carve your own path thing, like, if you have something that you really want to do, like, don't let people tell you it's stupid unless it's, you know, something that's going to like harm you. Like, oh, yes, let me go, like, jump off this bridge and like be fine. Like, that's not a thing. But, if you want to travel, if you want to like learn a language, if you want to, like do something new, like, learn more about it and go for it.
Very nice. So how was Spain? Like, how was the trip? How was the people?
It was really good. It was definitely a big culture shock. I think that, um, I've actually never been to Latin America, but I think that a lot of people are like, oh yeah, Spain is just like, you know, Mexico or whatever. Maybe not to that extent because like it's Europe versus Latin America, but um, the culture is just, it's very different. Not in a bad way. It's like there's some things I agree with, some things I don't. Um, but it was cool to be able to like be in a country that has a different way of life. Like, they prioritize, a work life balance. They prioritize, like, family is very, very important in Spain. Things like that. So, um, yeah, I mean, it it's just like it was a wonderful year. The school I taught at one school for the first third, and it was just a really bad match. So I got switched to another school, and um, it was just phenomenal. I loved the teachers. I loved the kids. Um, and like I got to travel to different places for the first time, and I really took a lot out of that year.
Very nice. What grades did you teach when you were?
I At my first school, I taught preschool through second grade, and at my second school, I taught first through fourth grade.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Little kids are always fun. Um, how about some empowering women that you look up to?
So, let's see. There's just like a lot. I mean, the women in my family, my mom, my grandmom, um, a lot of the women who have really been pioneers in, the political space. I love Ruth Bader Ginsburg, um, Sonia Sotomayor. I'm a really big Supreme Court nerd, so I love those the four women. Susan B. Anthony and Elena Kagan as well. Like, um, I, I'm a big Elizabeth Warren fan. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think, like, in athletics, a lot of the top women in triathlon are really, I like don't know as much about them as, I did when I swam, but, it's really cool to see these women be able to accomplish, what they're capable of. So, um, yeah, there's probably many more, but I'm like blanking right now.
It's okay. I mean, there's so many that we can look up to and be inspired by, and it's just nice to see other people's like point of view, maybe some names that like, you mentioned some in the Supreme Court, which I have no idea who it is, but you can bet I'm gonna go and take a look now that I've heard them, and then just from different points of view, it's always nice to hear. Um, how about any tips or tricks you use to reset and like, you know, I don't know, when you're having a rough day and you just need to like reset? Is there anything you use?
Yeah, definitely. So I go for walks every day. That has always really helped me, and it was especially helpful at the beginning of my concussion recovery because it was something my doctors really encouraged, and I didn't necessarily feel like I was capable of doing a lot, but I could walk around the block, and I was like, well, I did that today, um, and like I'm a really big to-do list person, so if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I will just write down all of the things I have to do, and like I just feel better because I can make a plan of attack there. Um, and I just, depending on my mood, like I'll pick an artist or an album or something and like put on some music for a bit, just like tune out everything else. Um,
Who's your favorite artist to put on?
um, so contemporary is probably Florence and the Machine, and in terms of like artists who aren't as like current, I'm trying to think of like a good like term, but
Oh,
I
yeah.
absolutely love Fleetwood Mac.
Oh, they're good. I like
Yeah.
them.
So Stevie Nicks is probably another woman that like, yeah, she's fantastic.
She is. She's super awesome. Cake, I've never gotten over cake. I don't know why. It's happy and bubbly and
Yes.
it always puts me in a good mood. Plus, it's just fun to say, like, who's your favorite band? Cake.
Yeah.
All right. Um, tell us an inspirational quote that you use in hard times.
So probably the quote, um, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice.
All right. So, are you in, you said you're in political, like, what do you do for a career?
Um, so I'm actually like I'm about to start a new job, so I'm going to be working with a community learning center and really getting them the, connections with local officials and stuff like that, and create more of a an agenda in terms of protecting their grant money and things like that. But in the past, I've done political campaigns. I was working for a healthcare company before the car accident,
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so I've been like kind of back and forth, and um, yeah, but I'm like excited to kind of start a new type of work, and I'm in a master's program right now. So that's kind of why I'm a little wishy-washy right now on like my job title, because I'm still like one figuring out those details, but two, like my primary thing is my master's degree.
Right. You just have such a passion for political. I was just wondering if you were in it, especially since like we're getting ready for elections or we're in elections and stuff now. So that's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a really big and open Elizabeth Warren supporter, but I'm volunteering for her here in Philadelphia, but um yeah, I mean, the whole political climate makes me really nervous right now. So, we'll
Yeah,
see what.
we'll see. How is it working on a campaign? Like, what do you guys do? Like, how does that all operate? Because most of us only see like the opposite side where we're getting the phone calls or, stuff like that. So you want to let
Yes.
us know how that is?
So, probably the best example I have is when I was on the Hillary campaign. I was what you call field organizer. We were the people who are the boots on the ground. We're the ones who are in those offices and calling people and, getting volunteers and stuff. And basically the build up is you start getting people on the phones. As it gets closer to the election, you want to get people knocking on doors, because just that face to face interaction, and there's a higher response rate at the doors. You can have a better conversation there. You can leave people a little piece of literature with information. And it pretty much all builds up to what we call get out the vote, GOTV, which is the last 4 days of an election cycle. And you're basically knocking on everybody's door and um, not just reminding them to vote, but making a plan to vote. So that's, where's your polling place? Do you need a ride to the polls? Um, you know, all that different stuff, so that people are really, a lot of studies have shown that if you get people thinking about those aspects of voting, they're more likely to go and vote.
Very nice. Um, that's pretty much it for my show. Thank you for being on it. Thank you for giving us insight into voting and all of that. That's always an interesting topic.
Yes, absolutely.
All
Do it
right.
early and often.
Well, thank you for being on my show, and we'll talk to you again sometime soon.
Thanks.